Hey everybody, Questwise here, and I get asked a lot to run role-playing games. I, in my life, in my local area, I have a lot of friends who are role players, who enjoy the hobby, and I play with them as often as I can. But I also have a lot of people in my life who know that it's a passion of mine, but have never played before, and so I get asked a lot of times, hey, what are role playing games? How do they work? And it's usually on the fly. Like we're out having a drink, or um, it's happened to be somewhere, and they're like, hey, can you explain to me or show me what a role playing game is? And I'm usually don't have my books with me. I don't usually have stuff with me, but as a super big nerd, I always have dice with me. I usually always carry three six-sided dice with me wherever I go. It's just the thing. It's a thing that I do. It's again, like I said, it's super nerdy, but I always have dice with me. Maybe it's kind of my good luck charm, but it also sort of allows me to do something uh, whenever I'm approached to ask to run or teach how to play a role-playing game. And I came up with this idea. I call that the on-the-fly RPG, and it fits on an index card. These are the rules. And basically, I just want to teach the people who have never played before, people who haven't played before. I've done this with mixed groups of people who have played role-playing games their entire lives, of people who have never, ever experienced the concept before. And it works really, really well. And I've done it several times, and I've sort of refined it down to something that's... Now, this is not something I'm going to run a campaign with. This is totally just a one-shot idea, or maybe a short, maybe 3-game session. But it's enough that all the rules you need are on an index card, but it's enough to introduce people to the concept of role-playing and how dice mechanics work and that kind of stuff as well too. And I'm going to share it with you today. If you'd like a copy of this, I'll probably put the rules up on Discord. I haven't really decided yet. But I want to make it accessible to you if you want to try it out, if you just want to take this with you. So like I said, the rules are on a single index card, and this is a character sheet, another index card that is super simple. And that's all you need to play. And in fact, to play this, you only need a single D6. The whole concept, the rules mechanic is based on a single D6. But I'll explain it to you now, because I get a lot of people who ask me how this works. So, first thing you do when you sit down with your players is you talk about what kind of game they want to play. I've done this in fantasy. I've done it in science fiction. I've done a 1920s Prohibition America. I've done an Old West game with this as well too. A number of other things as well. And it works really well. But you first want to sit down and talk about the concept of the game. So let's use the 1920s Prohibition America as the idea. So we all decided that's what we're going to do. We're going to be set in an area in North America, in the USA, during the 1920s, when Prohibition, when alcohol was illegal, and how a lot of people became super rich by becoming rum runners, providing alcohol to people illegally. And so we decided on that theme. With that, I said, okay, I want you to think of a character. What character would you want to portray in that time period, and give yourself a name? That's step number one. Choose a name. Then once everybody had a name, I said, okay, I want you to choose your profession. What you do. It doesn't necessarily have to be your job, but what is it that your character does? So we had several people. We had a woman who said that she owned a restaurant that was a speakeasy. Was also a brothel. This was totally things that she came up with, was that she owned a restaurant that offered illicit services, as well as a speakeasy to provide alcohol to people. And we had one woman who said that she was a seamstress who actually worked at a business across the street from the restaurant, but she knew about the secret, about the speakeasy. We had one guy who said he was a rum runner, that he actually provided her with alcohol from a still. We had one guy who actually ran the still. We had I think six players in that game, but they all chose a profession, what their character did within the bounds of the story. Then they chose a background. Were they wealthy? Were they poor? Were they raised by wolves? Whatever it is that you want to do, choose a background where your character comes from. It's different from your profession. It's where your character, their previous lives have brought them to this point where they're now in their profession. And that's it. That's basically your character. Whenever you perform an action that involves some sort of fate, some sort of the chance that you could fail, you're going to roll a single 6-sided die. You roll the die. If you roll a 6, you succeed. Simple as that. In combat, it's the same way. You roll a 6, you succeed. Almost everything in the game does 1 point of damage. Your characters are able to take 3 points of damage before they're knocked out of the scene, basically. They don't necessarily die unless that fits into the story. They might just be wounded, they might just be hurt, they might just have been knocked out, but they're out of the scene until the next scene changes and there's a reasonable reason for them to come back. Okay? You can do that. You can take 3 wounds, 3 hits. Most villains can take the same thing. Minions, 1 hit and they're out. They're meant to be easily knocked out. Just, a goblin or a thug or whatever, boom, 1 hit, they're done. But villains, you want to have a little bit of longevity. And that's not a concrete rule. There's no concrete rules in all of this. It's one index card. Because in one game when we were doing a fantasy theme, I actually gave a dragon 5 hit boxes, which made it a little bit tougher for them to take out and made them be a little bit more ingenious in their way to doing things. Here's where the twist comes in. If during your action, if the game master has asked you to roll a die, if you can justify using your profession or background in the roll. So say, you're in the wilderness, you're trying to survive, and I tell you to make some kind of survive. I want you to make a check to see if you can survive getting out of this. And you're like, hey, my background was I was raised by wolves, so this is my homeland. You're going to get a bonus, all right? If you can justify either your profession or your background, you then need a 5 or a 6 to succeed. And finally, if you can justify both your profession and your background in the same role, you need a 4, 5, or 6 to succeed. So it changes with every situation. Some situations you're going to be better at things like diplomacy, and you're going to be better at things at like some kind of an economic thing or survival role as opposed to a combat role. If you're a soldier, if your profession is soldier, you're probably more likely to get bonuses during attacking people than what you are going to when you're trying to be diplomatic with people. And that's basically the rules of the game, really. We did some things, and there's lots of variation. There's lots of gray area, and it's really story, narratively driven, dependent kind of things. So like in our fantasy game, one of the characters found a magic sword, and I'm like, well, okay, how do I make this sword feel more special than just like it still does 1 point of damage? So what I did is I basically gave him a +1 to his roll. So whenever he rolled the sword, he had to, a 6 is normally a success. For him, it was a 5 and a 6. Or if he could add his profession, it became a 4, 5, or 6. All the way down to 3 and up, basically, was the magic sword gave him a bonus to attacking things. And they had healing potions, which, he would drink one and it would heal a box of damage and stuff as well, too. But yeah, the character sheet is simply that. It's simply your name, your profession, your background, any equipment that you might need useful, things you want to remember, notes, basically, and then your 3 wound boxes. That's it. That's the whole game. But if you'd be interested in having this sort of available to whatever, I'll put it up for free. Like I said, I'll decide and I'll notify you when I put it up. I'm thinking maybe I'll just write it out in Discord and provide a link to that page and stuff as well too. But just thought you would care to know what I do for my on the fly. I carry this with me and some dice, and I'm able to teach a game the concepts, the basics of role playing. And once people are hooked, then I bring them into something else, like Swords and Wizardry or Vaesen or or D&D 5e, or whatever it is, kind of thing that they would find most appealing to introduce them to the full hobby. But on the fly RPG, I'm Questwise. Until next time, be safe, game on, my friends.